All right. Hey, folks, we are still at OSCON. I am talking to Thomas Grassl from SAP. And we were chatting beforehand. And, I mentioned that my brother used to work for SAP, and he didn't do anything that had anything to do with software for them. And it's a big company, but it's not one of those companies that really comes to mind when you think of open source. So we're gonna kind of dive into a few things that they've got going on.
This episode is sponsored by Sentry.io. Recently, I came across a great tool for tracking and monitoring problems in my apps. Then I asked them if they wanted to sponsor the show and allow me to share my experience with you. Sentry provides a terrific interface for keeping track of what's going on with my app. It also tracks releases so I can tell if what I deployed makes things better or worse. They give full stack traces and as much information as possible about the situation when the error occurred to help you track down the errors. Plus, one thing I love, you can customize the context provided by Sentry. So, if you're looking for specific information about the request, you can provide it. It automatically scrubs passwords and secure information, and you can customize the scrubbing as well. Finally, it has a user feedback system built in that you can use to get information from your users. Oh, and I also love that they support open source to the point where they actually open sourced Sentry if you want to self-host it. Use the code devchat at Sentry.io to get 2 months free on Sentry's small plan. That's code devchat at Sentry.io.
Now, we're probably going to post this to the JavaScript Jabber podcast. And so you folks, we'll start with you folks and what you're interested in. And then we can kind of come back around to some of the other open source stuff. But Thomas, you folks released a UI5 component library for web development.
Exactly. So the thing we released, it's called UI5 Web Components.
Mm-hmm.
And in a nutshell, what it is, it's HTML components, but like really focused on like enterprise capabilities.
Okay.
So just think about a date picker.
Mm-hmm.
These are like, we are using the same date picker in our applications. So they work in different languages, different calendars. You can theme them. Different languages, localization, and all of the stuff. So there's about 25 components, web components we released now. There's also like a longer standing history behind it, because initially we had the same components and even more in an open UI5 framework. Mm-hmm. But this required you the entire framework to take with. And now we said, okay, let's just shell out the web components. And that's, of course, great for any web developer out there, even if you're using React, Angular, and so on, other frameworks, to use these web components. Nice.
Now, some of these things have come a long way. I mean, I remember installing like jQuery plugins to get some of this functionality and things like that. You know, we're a little bit beyond that now. You mentioned Angular, Vue, and React. Now, a lot of these have their own component libraries, right? Or you've got companies that have built component libraries for these systems. Specifically. So I'm kind of curious, why do we need another one?
Yeah. Now, the thing is, like, for us, we definitely looked at other web components. And if you look at OpenUI5, initially we based it on jQuery as well.
Right.
But soon we realized, okay, there's more, we had just a longer list of requirements.
Right.
And this is like, if you need high contrast on these web components, it's like it's enterprise or application specific requirements. And we did all the work, but also felt we need more feedback, innovation coming from the outside component. And initially, when we did the OpenUI5 framework, that's where we got it a lot from the enterprise application developers who were using it more in the SAP space, because they used exactly the OpenUI5 framework for building extension applications, etc. But then we also realized, okay, we can take the same components, put it out to the entire web developer audience. And like our goal is really like to get the broader feedback around these components. Because often you see like, you develop something in-house, it works for the enterprise, but we also need to be very much like, where's the market going? And this is exactly like very interesting for us to work with the component, with the web developers out there, get the feedback. And this basically the ask what we have is like, have a look at it, let us know what you think, and provide us feedback where you want to see this thing going.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I love, I love the kind of give and take that comes from open source, right? Where it's, hey, you know what? We get community support, we get community involvement, everybody benefits because now it's better. And, so we've given something to the community, we've kind of gotten something back. One other thing that I'm curious about is just how this is structured so that it'll work with the different frameworks, because they all work in different ways. Do you have bridge libraries that, convert your HTML components into React components or Angular components or Vue components? Or is that something that developers are going to have to build on their own?
So the components, it's really HTML components. So if you go to the UI5 Web Component website, we have a whole list where it sees it basically make to include, and then you can use UI5 button or UI5 date picker and so on. And then it works over the standard how you would use any HTML component out there. So that's how it is, very open. And you can use then the regular things how you would treat an HTML component via React or Angular, etc. So that it keeps it very, very. They're very specific, and also looking into the standards there from our side, and that allows us then to be open. Even if you build a standard HTML web page, you can embed that.
Right. So it sounds like you've built them on the web component standard.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So it's kind of like Polymer, except you've built widgets, useful pieces.
And if you have a look, there's a lot of things in there. As I said, the date picker or a table control. Now you can imagine the requirements we have for a table to display 4 applications, which are doing finance, which doing sales or marketing. There's a lot of things in there, and that's the nice thing on the customization and how powerful these web components are. And that's really the market or the audience we want to share this. I was we also looking if someone says in the web, normal people would expect to do this in this way,
right? Or
this would be a great enhancement. It's also it's open source, so we're looking for pull requests also from the community. And this is also not something that SAP has started now to do this. OpenUI5 released probably 6-7 years back. So we the team who's working on this has a long-standing open source experience, and they actually drove this we want to expand it further out to more web developers and so on, because we also are set up for feedback. It's not just that we say do it and give us feedback and nobody reacts to it. And this is also very much a philosophy from SAP around open source is if we do projects our own, but also if you contribute, taking other projects into our things, if it's in Cloud Foundry or in Kubernetes, we are actively contributing. And there's a ground rule for us is for us just to take a component or a project in doesn't work. We need to be involved. We want to have the engineers involved, and that's the model we have basically built into our strategy.
That makes sense.
Hi, I'm Charles Maxwood. You've probably heard me on a lot of the shows on devchat.tv. The language that got me into programming and taught me to love it was Ruby. And eventually I got together with a bunch of my friends and we started the podcast Ruby Rogues. And that's how devchat.tv got its start. Ruby Rogues has been running since 2011 and has had conversations with a lot of people from the wider programming community that you've probably heard of, as well as very focused episodes with people from the Ruby community. If you're doing Ruby, if you love Ruby, if you're building tools in Ruby, then you should check out Ruby Rogues, and you can find it at rubyrogues.com.
One other question I have is you keep saying that you built this for enterprise apps. And when I talk to people and I push the enterprise button, I get all kinds of answers. So when you're talking about enterprise, what do you mean?
So enterprise is when I know the face you get when you say enterprises. Everybody thinks about
I probably am making a face because everybody says it, and it's okay, so it's just a big app.
Yeah. Now, so the thing is, these applications, so what are the requirements? You need to have them on a global basis. You have customers who are in Europe, you have customers who are in Arabic countries, you have customers in China, and so on. So now if you build an application, how often you build your UI?
Right.
You build it not like 5 times for every country. So
right.
This is exactly like things what enterprise functionality is in there. Next one is scalability.
Right.
So that's definitely like a big thing, because if we put an application out there, it's not being hit by 20 people. Like there's like, let's think there's a year end or a performance review in our HR application happening in February. And like a company which has 150,000 people are hitting the button at the same time.
Right.
So how do you scale and like how do you build this? So there's a lot of like these types, but then also security. Like how do you, is this like we put these applications out there for our customers say like this stuff needs to be secure.
Right.
We are managing this. And I think it's more these criteria when I say enterprise ready, but it's like the scalability, the usability, the security aspects, which are coming with these. Probably like if someone looks at the stuff first, it's like, oh, that's way too big. But then if you think like, oh, I want to get my app also out into a different country and I need to have it accessibility. That's also like very important features. You have this already built in.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's interesting because I kind of wanted to challenge you on some of those points, but it makes sense. I mean, not everybody operates in every market, but a lot of larger companies do. As far as the scale goes, if you're not in every market, then you don't have to scale as much. You just have to scale to whatever user base you do get. And a lot of companies, a lot of people, a lot of programmers spend a lot of time scaling, worrying about the scale, and they don't have to yet or at all. Yeah. And, the security again, if you're a big fish, you got more people trying to get at what you've got because that information is valuable. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, as far as your contributions to open source go in general, let me back up. So UI5, how do people go and get it and try it?
You go to GitHub and try it out.
Okay.
So that's the thing.
Is it under an SAP organization or?
It's under SAP organization, but you find it like some of our projects are directly under SAP organization. Some other projects are like within the Linux Foundation and so on. So it's also like depending on how projects are maturing. The web UI5 Web Components is under SAP.
That makes sense. And yeah, it's pretty easy to find stuff on GitHub that way.
Yeah, so. I always say like, what is the first thing a developer does? It's like you open up your browser, put a Google search in, and that's where you find it. So.
And then do you just install it through NPM or?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so let's move over a little bit. You run the developer relations side and the open source side of SAP, and so on the one hand, I mean the open source stuff. Your contributions to open source is one thing. Is the developer relations mostly focused around the open source contributions you're making, or do you have other technologies, APIs, things that you're hoping people are going to use from SAP?
Yeah. So the part I'm heading is developer relations. So in there, open source is one part, which is in the story about like, okay, what do we have for developers? But then of course there's also the technology from SAP we provide. This is on one hand like technology which our existing customers and partners are very much like interested. Goes into like database, data lake handling, building applications for SAP, for the partners to enhance SAP, which APIs are available from SAP to plug into our applications, etc. So it's a broad range of topics then like also which are more how do we get, like our goal is mostly then like really how do we get the information out, what is available. Then a big focus for us is on the enablement part. So where's my trial system? How do I try this out? And this is also, I think, what a lot of folks, again, like coming back to the cringing face on enterprise. The past when you thought like enterprise is like, okay, I need to buy like something big and big. Like we put almost all of our technologies out for free for trials. So this is definitely something which has changed also in the enterprise market over the last 10, 15 years, that people can try this out. And also outside of the SAP scope. So if you look for something where you need to do some analytics, or you need to do something in the machine learning, or you need a special API for doing taxation, we have this available for a developer to try out and build with these technologies. And of course, then for us, it's making it known that it is existing. So that's why we're here at OSCON. OSCON is, of course, more the focus around the open source community, but then we also have here a booth where we bring the folks who are contributing into these different projects, working with other projects, and also build the community, the network around it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's interesting too. I mean, you talk a little bit about your open source contributions, and then you've also talked a bit about your ecosystem. And one thing that I found is that a lot of developers, they go out and they're looking for that next thing, something that's going to be profitable and something that's going to be that they can get involved in and get excited about. And they don't consider a lot of these enterprise applications that need customization by a developer. And I mean, I know people that do customizations on things like Salesforce or Microsoft. They have their, I forget what it is, but it's kind of their enterprise information system. And there aren't a lot of developers out there. And so it's a very profitable way to go as far as consulting goes, to learn these systems, to build into them, to understand them, and then to go and consult on them.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a market, and I know it. I was a student way back, mid 90s, and I got introduced into the enterprise application market. And first, of course, I also must admit it wasn't interesting, because you don't have the good picture on what is actually development mean. But I always, when I go out and talk to students in universities, and think about it, how does the car part gets delivered to the car manufacturer in time, just in time? Which system is doing that one behind it? And this is where you find SAP systems, etc. How do you bill a customer correctly, how much beer they have you have shipped to them? Since we're in Portland, we have a beer story. But this is a lot of either standard software. So this is where SAP plays, but then there's a lot of customization around it, extensions around it, and it's a market which won't go away, and developers are needed. And there's also a lot of really, really interesting things out there. I talked yesterday with someone, a different project where they basically use drones to do plant maintenance. What it means is they fly drones over windmills. Instead of sending a guy up there, they use this, and then use, for example, also then machine learning, image recognition to see if parts are still in order, or they need to send someone up. So there's a lot of also really cool stuff happening out there. I guess some folks, that's what I also see from our ecosystem, or when we have our developer conference, they know that space. They're really excited about it. But then often they also have the things, I talk to someone new, and they're I need to explain it, what I'm doing. It's a little bit thing, but it's a very interesting area for developers to work in.
Yep, absolutely. And
it pays good.
It pays really well. And the reason is because a lot of the customers that are looking for solutions like this on the enterprise scale, you're going to solve their problem, but it's going to solve their problem hundreds, thousands, millions of times. And so it brings massive value what you're bringing in. And so you can charge premium rates, and they're getting a deal on it because it's going to save them that kind of money.
Yeah, and another aspect is partnering. We also see a lot of partners and also startups who start up with a great idea, and then they discover sometimes they try it first in the consumer space, and then maybe we can adjust this for the enterprise. And SAP has over 350,000 customers. You can imagine if you get certain integrations going, there's a large market out there
Yep.
For you to bring your applications within
Right.
that space.
Have you been thinking about building a mobile application, but you're a web developer and you're not really sure you want to learn Swift or Objective-C or Kotlin or Java or any of the languages that are used natively by those platforms? Well, you should check out React Native. React Native is a platform managed by Facebook. You can share a lot of your state management and other logic code between your applications. And we have a podcast that talks about all of the issues and all of the advantages of using React Native. And you can check that out at reactnativeradio.com.
So how do you approach developer relations? I mean, do you have your developer relations advocates like out speaking at conferences? Do you sponsor open source software? Are you putting out content on the web? I mean, what are you doing there?
Yeah. So from the programs, what we do is it's like focusing on like the awareness part. So this is where you have advocates or evangelists speaking at conferences. Also like sending, like for example in the open source space, and sending folks who are contributing to other conferences speak there, this is more like getting the awareness and so on. And then a lot of like the thing, what I always say for developer relation is really important is like your web presence.
Right.
Because unfortunately a lot of developers, you're not allowed to go to a lot of conferences. It's budget reasons. You maybe can sneak into a local conference. This is why we also address do regional events, etc. So it's not that we ask them come to our big conference. No, we need to go to where the developers are, help them. We do also very small scale events, like for 20, 30 people. If someone says, I want to learn about the web UI framework you guys put out, raise your hand, and then we send an expert out to you to come and build this. And then a lot of learning content, make it very easy to understand. Like for developers, it's always I have a problem, I have an issue, I need to find a solution, and paint this up. Also show okay, someone else has it. Here's a showcase. Someone else built this one with that product and with that technology, and that helps developers to understand. So a lot of investment also in tutorials and community building.
Right.
I have a lot of our advocates also in our community answering questions. And there's, just to also give you a scale, SAP community with about 2.8 million people coming in every month.
Yep.
So there's a lot of activity happening.
You stay busy.
We're staying busy.
That's awesome. So if people want to get involved with SAP open source, I think you mentioned the content or contributor license. Yeah.
So first question, SAP, how you want to, if you want to just check out what we have, it's opensource.sap.com.
Okay.
So make it easy from a URL, or if you want to see what's developer, it's developers.sap.com. And then you see what we have to offer. And it's sometimes more specific to SAP, or as I said, it's a framework for building UI applications.
Right.
But then also we are often, when we see something which the market needs or the developer community needs, then we also open source it. So one of these projects was the contributing license assistance. So for example, if you have a project and you want to contribute, you need to sign a license agreement. And we had this problem internally with our open source projects.
Yeah, I did an interview with the Apache Foundation 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And we had a long conversation about contributor license agreements and
And so the thing was for us, and in the early times, there were still faxes going back and forth. So
this the good old days.
It's good old days of faxes. You sign it, send it back, and then what we did is this. We need to put this, and then GitHub. That was 4 or 5 years back when it really became much more involved. And then we built this CLA assistant, and basically allows you for your repository to plug it in, and anybody who wants to contribute want to do a pull request, you can use the tool to sign the license agreement. And yeah, it's like it started small, and then the interesting thing, it was like 50%, I would say, the tool, but then also the knowledge around it,
Right.
how to use it. And that started a lot of like usage. And next time we checked, I was like, okay, that company is using it. So it's very easy to figure it out. You just type in CLA Assistant into GitHub, and then you see all the companies who are using it.
Right.
And we got a lot of feedback. This is great. Can you do this? So this actually really was a grassroots open source project.
Nice.
And also like the feedback is great, and there's many companies out there using it, and we're contributing, but it's actually not like, it's really a nice community, open source community project now, which drives it on its own. And it's also a great story to see.
Now, I know that some of our listeners aren't going to know what a CLA is. Do you want to just explain what it is and why they're important?
So basically, when you contribute to a project, you give like your IP into the project. And this license agreement is basically that you understood that your IP is given to this project. And that's why you need to have this. This is also, as you say, like a lot of like knowledge building, like education for developers out there. And I think it's good to have these tools. And that was also very important. It needs to be simple.
Right.
And not just like that. And the community drives a lot of awareness around it now. And I think it's much more understood now than when was your project interview, like 10 years back.
10 years ago, yeah.
Where like nobody really had like, why we need this?
Yeah, the Apache Foundation did it because so just to back up, the way I usually explain to people is that if you create something by default in the United States, at least, you own the copyright to it, right? And so that's the intellectual property that you own. There's some law around if you create it at work for your business, blah, 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 then they own it, right? And so this is just to clarify who owns the software when you write it. And so this is saying the project owns the software. They have the right to distribute it. They'll distribute it according to their license agreement. And that's basically the thrust of it. So then there's no confusion over, my employer is going to sue them because they think they own part of this project. And so they're using copyrighted code that they don't have the right to. And so when I was talking to the Apache Foundation folks, I mean, that was essentially what the discussion was that, they want to be able to distribute the software and let people use it however they want, as long as it's within the confines of that license agreement. And they can't do that if they don't own it. And so...
And it's as you said, like it's also for a lot of developers, if you're interested in open source, it's the understanding. Like, talk to your employer. Like, can you? Like, some employers don't even allow you to do this because they like look into your things. This is also stuff we drive with the community. Like it's important. Everybody needs to understand it.
Yeah, I think most projects that I see out there in open source, they just kind of play fast and loose with this, right? People just contribute. Has a license agreement on it, and then it's usually something like MIT, which is super simple. Do whatever you want with this. We're not going to give you any guarantees. And so, but if it gets widely used, if there's a bad actor, things like this really help out. So I don't know if I have anything else to ask you. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about or bring up?
No, as I said, like if you're interested, like in the open source space, it's like you should be here at OSCON. Like but I know like it's sometimes hard to get to this conference. But there's a lot of like things also happening in the community, and that's also great for every developer out there. Like it's like to make these connections, involve yourself into these things. And if you're interested what we are doing in the SAP space, as I said, like opensource.sap.com or developers.sap.com. It's like two things. Have a look.
Yeah, makes sense. Are you on social media or GitHub where people can follow you?
I'm on social media. It's very simple. It's @Grassl. So my last name, and you can follow what we're doing and what are the stuff we're pushing. And I'm also like it's developer relations. It's the relation part. I'm very much like also listening. That's the important thing. Feedback. That's why I'm also here in the booth, listening what other people have questions about what we're doing. So it's always great to have these connections and community engagement as well.
Nice. And I'm going to help our listeners out. If you're looking for Grassl, it's Grassl. Yeah. So
it's German.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's not a kind of a standard spelling that you would guess.
Yeah.
So,
and it's Southern German. So.
Oh, you're a Southern boy, huh?
Yeah.
You can tell from the accent.
Exactly. Sometimes they say like, okay, it's more towards Austria and
yeah. Very cool. Well, thanks for coming and talking to me, Thomas.
Thank you.
All right.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit